Okay, the brakes are real good, real good. So with my Lancer, it's I've been wanting to do a brake upgrade for quite a while. Not only just because the brakes are getting through wear and tear, they do need to be replaced, but I've been wanting to put better brakes on. And I started looking around as to what was available, and a very common mod you see people do to the early model Lancers is to upgrade to the later model Lancer stuff, the Brembo stuff. But the issue with that is, the early model Lancers are only a 4 stud. It's not the most common stud pattern, it's the 4x114.3. Whereas a new Evo is more common, like a 5x114.3. So in order to do that, you've got to convert the car to a 5 stud pattern. And it's also not the most straightforward conversion. It's not like it just bolts on. You've got to get parts from the rear from different Mitsubishi models. I know a lot of people have done it, but it isn't the most straightforward thing. It also means, the biggest thing is you've got to change obviously your wheels. You've got to go to a 5 stud wheel. In my case, I do like the 16s. I've got 16-inch wheels in this car. I do like them. I think it suits the car, the size of the car. It's not an overly big car. I don't think it needs huge 18-inch wheels or anything on it.
They don't have very big arches and the trailing arms.
No, you can't feel a lot of rubber on those cars. So at the moment, this car's only running 205s. I mean, by modern standards, they're cheese cutters.
Yeah.
I mean, they're tiny, but it's not a lot of tyre, but it's also not a lot of weight of car. I mean, this car only weighs about, I think it only, in its current guise, I'm guessing it probably weighs maybe 1260, 1280. There's no way it will weigh 1300. And so I was looking around to see, then I started looking around, are there 4 stud brake conversions you can do, just upgrades? And I actually initially went searching thinking there won't be anything, because I actually rarely see people do brake upgrades to these cars that aren't the later model Brembos from Evos. But to my surprise, there's actually a few companies out there doing what they call big brake kits. So they're upgrading the discs and calipers. The whole lot gets upgraded, so you don't use any of the factory parts, obviously. And my biggest concern was, well, how do you know it fits under the wheels? So you don't know how big a disc can I go, how big will the caliper fit under there?
Yeah, in short, you don't know whether a new brake upgrade is going to fit under your existing wheel setup.
No, and especially because I'm not running, it's pretty common on a car like this for people would have gone to a 17-inch rim. It gives you that much more clearance, not so many hassles with, say, the size of the brakes, just that extra inch. And because mine are 16, I knew, well, it's not really a very big wheel. It also does depend on the style of the wheel. These wheels have it's a common kind of style you see in many cars, but the spokes are fairly outwards. Yeah. They're not...
So essentially you wanted to run a larger caliper, but not with an overly large disc.
Well, it was more to do with what can I fit under the wheel.
Yeah.
I went looking around, I wasn't even sure what I can fit. So I started looking around on Google. I think this is one of the first ones I found. A lot of them are from overseas. You get an option, you can see here you can get 4 piston, 6 piston, you can get bigger size brakes. Another brand I actually conversed with a fair bit was Seeker. They had... Their brake kits look really good. They have a lot of options with even things like the type of discs, but also you've got dust covers, all sorts of things. That's more for climates with snow and a lot of crap on the road. That's not really relevant how I use my car. But what was cool too is you could get your caliper finished in any color. The hats, pretty much. You could even do a custom color. I think it was really flexible. I was almost going to go down that path, but one thing obviously was, well, how do I know it fits on the car? They give you these things called wheel cards. So they give you a PDF and you print it out and you make sure that millimeter by millimeter, obviously the print is 1:1, meaning if it says it's 270 millimeters, physically measure it that it's 270 millimeters. And then basically you stick that on cardboard. I've got some here. You stick that on cardboard. This is a 304 millimeter disc by 26. And I'll go out and show you in a sec, but this is basically the shape of the caliper and the shape of the disc. So you put this in the wheel and it basically gives you an idea of, if
it's going to fail somewhere.
You've got 2 concerns. Is that actually going to physically fit in the inside of the wheel? And then the spokes, the next issue. I've got, say for instance, a 286 millimeter disc and a 304. They're both the same width and they both use the same caliper. So when you line them up, obviously the 304 millimeter brake is a little bit longer. So you can put these in. So let's try the big one. And you put them in and you can actually, roughly center it. And then you can basically spin it around and see if it's going to hit anything. In this case, there's not a lot of clearance to the caliper here. It's interesting. This is a bigger disc and it looks like it clears. It gets extremely close to the spoke though. Yet if you go to a smaller one, because it actually pulls the caliper inward, you think, oh, hey, this will fit better. In this case, it actually hits the spoke. It actually hits here because the caliper is actually sitting towards the hub more, whereas it actually needs to sit. Effectively, the bigger brake actually fits on that. See, that's not going to clear. It's actually clicking the spoke. Some kits were slightly different, and some of these wheel cards too were, some of the center hole measurements weren't quite right. They were like 64 millimeters, and the wheels themselves are 69, and something, it just set off a bit of a red flag. And I started wondering if some of these big brake kits that some of these companies offer, have they actually ever fitted them? They may have factory stats from the manufacturer and say, yes, that'll all bolt on, but does it actually bolt on? So when I was kept on looking around, I ended up finding a guy in New Zealand, and he actually at least had pictures of his brakes on a Lancer. And so that kind of, I made my mind up and went this way and ended up buying a kit through this company called Mann & Racing Products. He sells a lot of variety. Basically, all his kits are wheelwood calipers.
You told me you had to have a 300 millimeter disc.
The wheel cards are a bit, they're not perfect, and you have to make sure you need a bit of clearance in there. And I thought the worst thing I wanted to do was I get a kit sent over and it doesn't fit. They might say it fits on a 16, but they can't guarantee that because depending on the rim design is the biggest difference. So I ended up being a bit conservative and getting a 294 millimeter disc. It's a Brembo disc. I went for a 6-piston Dynapro wheelwood caliper. And it comes with, like, obviously the adapters for the caliper, because the caliper obviously doesn't just bolt onto the factory location. They have to give you adapters to sit the caliper in the right spot based on the car and the size of the disc. And it also comes with all the fittings, the brake lines and everything. So we're in the process of having a go at fitting that today. So these GSR Lancers from factory came with a pretty basic brake setup. I can't remember what the actual size of the disc was. I think it was only like a...
240?
No, that's I think it was 267, something like that. And they only had a single piston caliper. The previous owner upgraded this with the early Evo stuff. It doesn't sound a lot better. The disc is only, I think it's 275 or 276, it's around that size. But the caliper's better. It's a 2-piston caliper. It doesn't sound much. It also came with really good pads. It had a really good set of Ferrado pads in it. This has done a few track days, and they've been on the car forever. Like, I'm talking 10 years. I don't do a lot of Ks in this car, but it actually brakes pretty well for what they are. For an old, what is this, mid-90s brake setup with some decent pads, even at the track, they haven't been too bad. They haven't faded really that much, but it got to the point where, everything really needs replacing. The rotors, the rotors don't feel too smooth anymore. They actually feel quite shocking when I run my hand over it. The pads...
You said your pads were getting a bit low?
Well, ironically, while I was waiting for this, for the new brakes to come from overseas, these actually started squealing, which is, it's probably an indication the pads are quite low. I've taken them out of the other side, I can show you, but the pads are down. There's not a lot left on them. And when you add it up, it probably would have cost $500, $600, $700 to probably replace everything. And you kind of sit there and think, well, why wouldn't I just spend more and upgrade the brakes? Otherwise, I could have gone and replaced everything. Yes, it's easy and all that, but effectively you got the same brakes in the car. So give us a look at what you've purchased. That's a standard, I think, 275 or so. This is the 294. So, it's actually not that much bigger. Obviously, this is slotted. It's been heat treated. You just buy them like that. They just come like that. Really, all the braking improvement will be through the caliper. So these are the wheelwood 6-piston calipers. You can see the pistons here. They're actually quite light, much lighter than I thought. Obviously made from aluminium.
So you don't get a choice in colour or anything like that?
No, I mean this is just factory stuff you buy off the shelf basically. It's not like the other stuff I was talking about where you can get things painted and coated in different coatings and this is more of a kit that has been made up using just other manufacturers' parts. And what is custom, obviously you get brake lines and so forth, but you need adapters. So to get this caliper actually on the hub, you need an adapter. So in this case, you can see here, this is an Evo 1-3. It's a 294mm brake and it's a Dynapro 6-piston. So that is basically the key to mounting the entire brakes. So that's what gives you the ability to upgrade the brakes and fit this bigger brake system on essentially Everything else is OEM. So here you can see the caliper design is very different to the factory one. The factory one is what people would call like a clamshell, how you kind of open that up and pull your pads out. This is a fixed unit. You'd have to swing the whole caliper up to get these pads out. I mean, overall, the caliper isn't actually that much bigger. It's just it's a lot wider. Actually, in some ways, looks a bit more compact. I mean, this is because it's designed specifically for this brake rotor, whereas I'm basically fitting 2 generic calipers and discs together.
Yeah. But it can't, look, it's a good size. It can't be enormous because it's still got to fit under that 16.
No, and that was the key. I wasn't going to go and get any, 330mm brakes aren't going to fit on the car, not unless I want to run 18-inch wheels, and I don't want to do that. See this dust cover? It's designed, obviously, for the factory disc. You can see how tight that is. We can't run that. We need to actually trim this off, cut this off.
Yeah, because it'll hit the new disc.
Oh, 100%. The disc won't go on at the moment at all. Where's the 10mm?
This garage is enormous, Jordo.
It's it's only, I think, it's 3.8 wide. I'm not used to working in a single car garage. It's pretty shit house, actually. Ow, what the f***?
It's gonna be tight.
Ow, what the f***?
We're starting.
Ow. You can't beat these things, they're unreal. A lot of disc rotors will have like a little screw that will hold it on. These don't have any, so in theory, they should just come off, but after years and years of being on the car, they're basically seized onto the hub. So
yeah, so they're not really bolted on, they just sit there effectively.
No, but use a bit of force to get this off. You basically just got to hit it around. This is a soft hammer. Here we go. See here these discs, it has the minimum thickness, so it's saying at 22.4 these discs need to be replaced. This is the width once they wear down. And you can see here it says right side, so it needs to go on the right side of the car obviously because these are directional, I guess the angle of these slots. It's because this is an Evo 4 disc. It's actually a 5 stud, so this has been re-drilled for a 4 stud for my stud patterns. That's why there's so many holes in this disc. The original pad has a much larger surface area than the new ones, so it's surprising to see just how small these pads are. But the difference is that on the old caliper you've got 2 pistons pushing from the back side of the disc, and on the front side there's nothing, so it's only applying pressure from one side. Whereas with this one you've got pistons on each side applying even pressure to both sides of the disc. The pads that came are just Willwood brand. They're like I guess like a performance street pad. They're nothing crazy, but they should, hopefully they have a good pedal feel. I mean, this isn't done up tight yet, but an easy way to see if this is aligned is the center of this caliper should be lining up with the center of disc. And that might be a case of you might have to put another washer in there. I'm just using the washers supplied with the kit. They look like they're lining up pretty well. So the brake lines are now installed. They just connect to the factory hardline, and as you can see, it's a pretty simple process. So finally, I'm going to try and put this wheel on. Now, from my calculations, it should fit. It'd better fit, or else I've kind of screwed myself, and I'll be buying new wheels. On initial impressions, it does look pretty good, actually. Actually, looks like there's more clearance there than I'd imagine, which is really good.
So when I left you last, you were fitting the brake lines to this car, and I thought, oh yeah, you're done, I'm out of here. So You've had a few dramas since then.
Well, yeah, I got the car on the road. The lines went on pretty straightforward. I got the car on the road, and the brakes didn't feel too great. So I thought, oh, maybe I just didn't bleed them properly. There's a bit of air in the line, and obviously it's worth rechecking that. So I re-bled them all again. It made absolutely no difference at all. Yeah, this brake pedal, it's very average. It's spongy. Pedal's going way too far to the floor. Basically, I was driving and the pedal's very soft. It doesn't brake at all. It actually feels like they kind of brake if you're only doing 10 or 15 k's an hour, but even then it should just really have an impact on the pedal. It should be really on. It doesn't have any bite, if that's the right word. I'd speed up to like 40 or 50 k's an hour just in a side street here, and the car felt like it would take about 20 meters to brake. It was bloody awful, actually. So it's pretty disappointing. So then I did a bit more investigation and found out that this kit on this car actually needs an upgraded master cylinder that I wasn't aware of at the time. So what these cars, these GSRs, they have a 7/8 of an inch master cylinder, and they only have a single piston caliper brake. Now remember, this came with a twin piston upgrade from an Evo. So then I thought, okay, do I upgrade to an Evo master cylinder, which is a 1 inch? You can see it written here. They're all specify what size they are. So this is a 1 inch master cylinder from like a VR4, an early VR4 or an early Evo. So I go to thinking maybe I'll upgrade to that, and I look at my master cylinder and it's actually got a 1 inch on it already. So it's more than likely, if someone had updated the master cylinder in any of these age cars, they're just going to end up with a 1 inch master cylinder because it fits all the cars. So long story short, it's still not good enough for these brakes. So a few people suggested an Evo 7 master cylinder. So they're slightly bigger, they're 1 1/16. And an Evo 7 has decent Brembos all round, much bigger brakes than say this car. I'm hoping that will work okay. I'm told it should work okay. So good friend Barry, Mr. 4G Barry, he's coming over shortly with a master cylinder from an Evo 7 and give me a hand to get it on the car. Hopefully that'll fix the issue.
So this is an Evo 7.
Evo 7.
Physically they'll bolt the same flange, very similar. There's only a few millimeters difference internally here. It's a bigger cylinder, so you can see here 1 1/16, if you can see that casting.
After comparing the measurements on both master cylinders, it was clear that this larger, later model Evo 7 version should fit the standard brake booster. A quick mod to the brake stopper brace was required to allow for fitment. Try a few brakes off the freeway, that way I can try it at a higher speed. You can't really test the brakes at 60 kilometers an hour, that's not a great test. Oh yeah, the brakes are real good, real good. Jeez, it feels like you can push them a lot harder. They feel really nice. The pedals actually, yeah, it actually feels really good. Yeah, this is much better. Yeah, the brakes have way more bite. I reckon even once they get a little bit of temperature into them, and the brake pedal feel with this master on it is miles better. The pedal, I was speaking to a few people about these kind of performance calipers, and they'll never have a sensitive pedal more like an OE pedal. They'll be more progressive, but that's fine as long as you get used to how the pedal works, and as long as the brakes, the more you press on the pedal, the brakes ideally obviously should get stronger. I think ultimately to really test these brakes, really got to do this on a track. You can't, how fast can you drive on the street? Obviously posted speed limit. Yeah, you probably have to get it out on a track and brake from a much higher speed, then you'll get a far better idea of just if the brake upgrade's been worth it. But I mean, I'm happy with after the master cylinder. The master cylinder has definitely improved it by a mile. And I've actually noticed the more I stop on the brakes, it's like they're starting to feel better. I mean, they're probably still bedding in a little bit.